There are moments in life when everything you believed about yourself, about your friendships, about the person sleeping in the bed across from yours, shatters into pieces so small, you spend years just trying to find them all. I remember the exact second my world collapsed. Not the day, not the hour, but the precise second. I was standing in the hallway of Whitmore Hall at Boston University, holding a letter that accused me of academic fraud I never committed, while the guy I called my best friend stood 3 feet away with concern painted across his face, like an artist who had practiced his strokes 1,000 times before showing them to the world. My name is Marcus Thompson, and 7 years ago, I lost everything because of a man named Derek Holloway. I lost my scholarship, my girlfriend, my reputation, and nearly my future. But here is what Derek never understood about me. I grew up in a household where my mother worked double shifts at a hospital in Baltimore just to keep the lights on. My father left when I was 6, and my older sister practically raised me while mom was gone. We did not have money, but we had patience. We had the kind of stubborn resilience that comes from knowing that every single thing you own, you earned with your own hands. Derek came from a world where problems disappeared with a phone call, where consequences were things that happened to other people, where the rules were suggestions written for those who could not afford to break them. 7 years. That is how long I waited. Not because I was planning revenge every day, not because I was obsessed, but because I was building a life out of the rubble he left behind, and I knew, somewhere deep in my gut, that the universe keeps receipts. Sometimes it just takes a while to cash them in. Let me take you back to where this all began. I arrived at Boston University in the fall of 2015 with 2 suitcases, a laptop my sister saved for 3 years to buy me, and a full academic scholarship for computer science. I was the first person in my family to attend a 4-year university. My mother cried at the bus station in Baltimore, holding my face in her hands, telling me this was our chance, our one shot. I carried that weight with me every single day. The dorm room I was assigned to was in Whitmore Hall, a building that had seen better decades but still held a certain charm for someone who had never lived anywhere that was not within shouting distance of a highway overpass. When I opened the door to room 412, Derek Holloway was already there, unpacking clothes that cost more than my entire wardrobe combined. He turned around and smiled at me. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you had just been chosen, like you were suddenly part of something exclusive just by being in his presence. He extended his hand and said his name like it was a gift he was offering me. Derek Holloway. His handshake was firm, practiced, the kind of handshake his father probably taught him before he learned to tie his shoes. I introduced myself, suddenly aware of how my thrift store jacket looked next to his cashmere sweater. But Derek did not seem to notice. Or if he did, he was excellent at pretending otherwise. He asked me where I was from, what I was studying, whether I played basketball because I had the height for it. Within an hour, it felt like I had known him for years. That was Derek's gift. He could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. I did not realize until much later that this was not generosity. It was strategy. Derek collected people the way some people collect stamps. He liked having a diverse portfolio of friends because you never knew when someone might be useful. I was useful because I was smart. Genuinely, deeply smart when it came to technology and code. Derek was studying business administration, which at Boston University meant networking events and group projects and a lot of talking about things he would never actually build himself. But computer science was increasingly essential to business, and Derek knew that having a friend who could explain algorithms and databases made him look more competent in his classes than he actually was. Our friendship, if you could call it that, grew quickly. We ate together, studied together, went to parties together. Derek introduced me to people whose parents owned companies I had only read about. I introduced Derek to professors who respected hard work over family names. It seemed like a fair trade at the time. Then, in the spring semester of our freshman year, I met Chloe Bennett. She was in my Introduction to Philosophy class, a required course I resented until I saw her sitting 3 rows ahead of me, taking notes in handwriting so neat it looked like calligraphy. Chloe had dark hair that fell past her shoulders, green eyes that seemed to change shade depending on the light, and a laugh that made everyone around her want to be funnier. I was not smooth with women. I had spent high school working part-time jobs and taking care of my family. Dating was a luxury I could not afford, but something about Chloe made me brave. I started sitting closer to her. I asked her questions about the readings. I offered to share my notes when she missed a class for a doctor's appointment. Slowly, awkwardly, I built a connection with her. By the end of freshman year, we were dating. It felt like a miracle. Here I was, a kid from Baltimore with nothing but a scholarship and a dream, dating a beautiful girl who laughed at my jokes and held my hand while we walked across campus. I called my mother after our first official date and told her I had met someone special. She cried again, happy tears this time, telling me I deserved all the good things coming my way. Derek was supportive, or so it seemed. He congratulated me, joked about how I was punching above my weight, offered to let me borrow his car if I wanted to take Chloe somewhere nice. I thought he was being a good friend. I did not notice the way his eyes lingered on her a little too long. I did not pick up on the subtle comments he made about how Chloe deserved someone who could really take care of her, someone with resources. I was too happy to see the cracks forming. Sophomore year was when everything intensified. My coursework got harder, requiring long nights in the computer lab debugging code that seemed determined to break me. Derek's business classes demanded more group projects, more presentations, more of the collaborative work he hated doing himself. Chloe was pre-law now, spending hours in the library preparing for classes that would set her up for the LSAT. We were all stressed. We were all stretched thin, and somewhere in that stretching, spaces opened up that should have stayed closed. I started noticing things, small things at first. Derek would mention conversations he had with Chloe that I did not know about. She would laugh at inside jokes they had apparently developed without me. When I asked her about it, she said Derek was just being friendly, that they ran into each other at the campus coffee shop sometimes, that it was nothing. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her because the alternative was too painful to consider. My best friend, my girlfriend, the two people I trusted most in the world outside of my family. The idea that they could be hiding something from me felt like paranoia, like insecurity born from growing up with nothing and suddenly having things I was afraid to lose, so I ignored it. I pushed the doubts down and focused on my work. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Then came the night that changed everything. It was March of our sophomore year. I had been working on a major project for my data structures class, a program that was worth 40% of my grade. I had spent 3 weeks on it, pouring every spare moment into writing clean, efficient code that I was genuinely proud of. The deadline was midnight, and I submitted it at 11:47, giving myself 13 minutes of breathing room. I decided to celebrate by surprising Chloe. She had said she would be studying late at the library, but I thought I would pick up her favorite tea from the shop down the street and meet her there. Maybe we could take a walk, talk about something other than classes for once. The library was nearly empty when I arrived. Finals were still weeks away, so most students had not entered panic mode yet. I walked through the main floor, then the second floor, then the third, but I could not find her. I texted her. No response. I called her. Straight to voicemail. A cold feeling started creeping up my spine. The kind of feeling you get when you know something is wrong but your brain has not caught up yet. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she went back to her dorm early. Maybe she was in a section of the library I had not checked. I walked back to my dorm instead. I would text her when I got there, make sure she was okay. But when I reached Whitmore Hall, when I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, when I approached room 412, I heard something that made me stop in my tracks. Laughter. Chloe's laughter. Coming from inside my room. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. My hand was on the door handle. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every instinct told me to walk away, to not open that door, to preserve whatever fragile reality I had built for myself. But I had to know. I opened the door. Derek was sitting on his bed. Chloe was next to him, her hand on his knee, leaning close in a way that was too intimate for just friends catching up. They both looked up when I entered, and I will never forget the expression on Derek's face. It was not guilt. It was not shame. It was annoyance, like I had interrupted something important. Chloe's expression was different. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, frozen and terrified. She pulled her hand back like Derek's knee had suddenly caught fire. I stood there, holding the tea I had bought for her, staring at the two people I trusted most, waiting for an explanation that would make sense, that would make this something other than what it looked like. Derek spoke first. He said my name like a question, like he was surprised to see me in my own room. Then he laughed, that easy, charming laugh that had fooled me so many times before. He said I had the wrong idea. He said Chloe was just upset about a grade she received. He said he was comforting her because I was busy with my project. Chloe nodded quickly, too quickly, agreeing with everything he said. She stood up and walked toward me, her hands reaching for my face. She said she was sorry for worrying me. She said nothing was happening. She said she loved me. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly, because the alternative meant that my entire world was a lie, that the friendship I valued, the relationship I cherished, the future I had been building, was all built on sand. So I chose to believe her. I let her hold my face and tell me nothing was wrong. I let Derek clap me on the shoulder and joke about how I needed to relax. I buried the doubt so deep that I thought it might never resurface. But doubt does not stay buried. It grows in the dark, feeding on small moments and whispered suspicions, until it becomes too big to ignore. Over the next few months, I tried to rebuild my trust. I focused on my relationship with Chloe, planning dates and making time for her despite my crushing workload. I tried to reconnect with Derek, pushing past the awkwardness of that night in our room. But something had shifted. Something fundamental had broken, and no matter how hard I tried, I could not fix it. The signs kept appearing. Chloe would mention plans she had with Derek that I was not invited to. Derek would be absent from our room at strange hours, offering vague explanations about study groups or networking events. They would exchange looks across tables that felt like entire conversations I was not part of. Then, in April of our sophomore year, I got the letter. It came from the Office of Academic Integrity, a department I had heard about but never interacted with. The letter stated that I was under investigation for academic fraud. Specifically, I was accused of submitting code for my data structures project that was not my own work. The letter said that the code I submitted showed significant overlap with work submitted by another student in a different section of the same course. I remember reading those words over and over, trying to make them mean something different. Academic fraud. Not my own work. Overlap with another student. It did not make sense. I had written every single line of that code myself. I had spent weeks on it. I had debugging logs and version histories and notes that proved it was my work. I went to the Office of Academic Integrity the next day, expecting to clear everything up quickly. They showed me the evidence, my code, another student's code. The overlap was undeniable, not just similar approaches or coincidental logic, but identical sections, entire functions that were character for character the same. The other student's name was Tyler Morrison. I had never met him. He was in a different section of the course, taught by a different professor. When I asked to see his submission, they told me it had been submitted 3 days before mine. 3 days. That meant, according to their timeline, Tyler had written the code first, and I had somehow copied it, but I had not. I had written that code myself, line by line, struggling through bugs and errors until it finally worked. I had not copied anything from anyone. I did not even know Tyler Morrison existed. I told them this. I showed them my debugging logs. I showed them my notes. I showed them the version control history on my laptop that documented every change I had made to the code over 3 weeks. They thanked me for my cooperation and said the investigation would continue. A week later, I was informed that the evidence was conclusive. My submission contained copied code. My explanations were not sufficient to prove otherwise. The penalty was severe. I would receive a failing grade for the course. I would be placed on academic probation. And my scholarship, which depended on maintaining a certain GPA and academic standing, was under review. I was devastated. I called my mother and tried to explain what was happening, but I could hear her crying on the other end of the line, asking me why I would do something like this, asking me if I needed help. She did not understand. She believed them, not me. Derek was sympathetic. He sat with me in our room while I processed the news, offering words of comfort and support. He said he believed me. He said the system was obviously flawed. He said I should fight this with everything I had. Chloe was supportive too at first. She held my hand and told me we would get through this together. But I started noticing that her support felt performative, like lines she was reading from a script. She would be present but distant, caring but cold. One night, about 2 weeks after I received the letter, I came back to the dorm earlier than expected. I had been at a meeting with an academic advisor, trying to figure out my options, and it had ended sooner than planned. When I opened the door to room 412, I found it empty. But Derek's laptop was open on his desk, and something on the screen caught my eye. A message thread. With Chloe. I know I should not have looked. I know it was a violation of privacy, an act of distrust. But after everything that had happened, after the investigation and the accusations and the growing distance between me and the two people I thought I knew, I could not help myself. I read the messages. What I found destroyed whatever remaining faith I had in human decency. The thread went back months, long before the night I caught them together, long before the academic fraud investigation. The messages were flirtatious at first, playful and teasing. Then they became explicit. Then they became coordinated. They had been sleeping together since the middle of freshman year, since before Chloe and I had even started dating officially. Our entire relationship, every moment I thought we were building something real, was happening alongside her relationship with Derek. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the messages about me. Derek had written to Chloe that I was becoming a problem, that I was too smart for my own good, that I was starting to notice things. He said he needed to find a way to get me out of the picture, to remove me from Boston University so that he did not have to keep sneaking around. Chloe had asked him how, and Derek had explained. He had a friend named Tyler Morrison, a guy he had met through his fraternity connections. Tyler was struggling in his data structures class and needed help. Derek had offered to get him that help. Specifically, he had offered to get him access to code written by someone who actually knew what they were doing. My code. Derek had copied my code from my laptop while I was sleeping. He had given it to Tyler. He had instructed Tyler to submit it before my deadline, to make it look like I was the one who had copied. The entire investigation, the accusation of academic fraud, the threat to my scholarship, it was all manufactured, fabricated by my roommate to remove me from his life so he could openly date my girlfriend. I sat there in the dark, staring at that laptop screen, feeling something shift inside me. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, so cruel, that I could not even process it properly. It was like being told that gravity was a lie, that everything I thought I understood about the world was fundamentally wrong. I took out my phone and photographed the message thread. Every single message. Then I closed the laptop exactly as I had found it. I did not confront them that night. I did not scream or cry or demand explanations. I just went back to my bed and lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window, trying to figure out what to do. The next morning, I went back to the Office of Academic Integrity. I showed them the photographs. I explained what I had found. I gave them Derek's name and Tyler Morrison's name and told them exactly what had happened. They thanked me for the information and said they would investigate. A week passed. Then, too, I checked in regularly, asking for updates, asking when my name would be cleared. The responses were always the same. The investigation was ongoing. These things took time. Meanwhile, my scholarship was suspended pending the outcome. I could not afford to stay at Boston University without that scholarship. My mother certainly could not afford it. I was given until the end of the semester to resolve the situation, or I would have to leave. Then, in early May, I received another letter from the Office of Academic Integrity. The investigation was concluded. The evidence I provided, specifically the photographs of the messages, had been reviewed. However, Derek Holloway had denied the allegations. He claimed that the messages were fabricated, that I had somehow created them to shift blame away from myself. He had provided character witnesses from his fraternity who vouched for his integrity. Tyler Morrison, when questioned, said he had never met Derek Holloway. He said he had written his code himself, just like I claimed to have written mine. The overlap, he suggested, must have been coincidental or the result of both of us using similar online resources. The investigation concluded that there was insufficient evidence to prove Derek's involvement. My original penalty stood. I would fail the course. I would lose my scholarship. I would have to leave Boston University at the end of the semester. I appealed. I hired a lawyer using money my mother had been saving for retirement. I presented every piece of evidence I had, but the university's position was clear. Without corroborating proof, without witnesses willing to testify against Derek, there was nothing they could do. Derek came from money. His family had donated to Boston University for 3 generations. His father sat on advisory boards for business programs across the country. Going against him meant going against an institution of wealth and privilege that the university depended on. I was a scholarship student from Baltimore with no connections and no resources. The outcome was never really in doubt. I left Boston University in May of 2017. I took a bus back to Baltimore with the same 2 suitcases I had arrived with, minus most of my hope and all of my trust in other people. My mother met me at the station, her face a mixture of love and disappointment that I will never forget. I did not tell her the full truth. I could not bear to see her believe that her son had been framed, that the world was as cruel as I now knew it to be. I just told her that things had not worked out, that I would find another way. I enrolled in community college that fall. I took computer science courses and worked nights at a warehouse to pay my bills. It was hard, grinding work, the kind that strips away everything but the essential question of whether you are strong enough to keep going. I was. Barely. 2 years later, I transferred to University of Maryland with a partial scholarship earned through my community college grades. I graduated with honors, then got a job at a small software company in Washington, D.C. I was good at my job. I worked harder than anyone else because I had something to prove, to myself, if no one else. By 2022, I was a senior software engineer at a mid-sized tech company. I had rebuilt my life from the wreckage Derek Holloway had made of it. I had a decent apartment, a reliable car, a career I was proud of. I even started dating again, carefully and slowly, learning to trust people in small increments. But I never forgot what Derek did to me. How could I? The betrayal had shaped me, carved itself into my personality like letters carved into stone. I was more cautious now, more watchful. I never fully relaxed around anyone because I knew how quickly the people closest to you could become the people who destroyed you. I did not spend those 5 years plotting revenge. I was not some dramatic villain waiting in the shadows. I was just a guy trying to live his life while carrying the weight of an injustice that had never been resolved. But I kept track of Derek, casually at first, then more deliberately. Social media made it easy. Derek was not shy about his accomplishments. He posted constantly about his career trajectory, his promotions, his networking events with important people. He had graduated from Boston University, of course, and gone on to get an MBA from Northwestern. Now he was a rising star at a major consulting firm in Chicago, the kind of place that charged clients millions of dollars for advice on how to run their businesses. He was engaged to Chloe. They had been together since college, officially dating since shortly after I left Boston University. Their engagement photos were everywhere, showing them laughing on beaches and posing in front of expensive restaurants. They looked happy. They looked like they had gotten exactly what they wanted. Sometimes, late at night, I would look at those photos and feel the old anger rising up in my chest. The unfairness of it all. They had betrayed me, framed me, destroyed my first chance at a real future, and they were thriving. Meanwhile, I had spent years clawing my way back from the hole they had pushed me into. But I told myself that revenge was not worth pursuing, that living well was the best response, that karma would catch up to them eventually without my help. I was wrong about the last part. Karma, I learned, sometimes needs a little assistance. In the summer of 2023, something unexpected happened. I received a LinkedIn message from someone named Professor Helen Marchetti. The name was familiar. She was a professor at Boston University, a distinguished academic who served on various ethics committees. I had never had her as a teacher, but I recognized her from my brief time on campus. Her message was brief but intriguing. She said she was conducting research into historical cases of academic fraud at Boston University. My name had come up in connection with a case from 2017. She wanted to know if I would be willing to speak with her. I almost did not respond. What was the point of dredging up the past? The case was closed. My appeal had been denied. Nothing could change what had happened. But curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to a phone call. Professor Marchetti was warm but direct. She explained that she was part of a task force reviewing old academic integrity cases. Recent advances in technology, specifically the ability to analyze code for stylistic patterns and authorship, had prompted the university to look back at cases where the outcome might have been affected by limited forensic capabilities. My case had been flagged because of the unusual circumstances. 2 students submitting nearly identical code was common in cheating cases. But the pattern of our submissions, the timing, the lack of any prior connection between me and Tyler Morrison had always struck certain faculty members as odd. She asked me to tell her what happened, the full story, from my perspective. So I did. For the first time in 6 years, I told someone the complete truth about Derek, about Chloe, about the messages I had found and photographed, about how my evidence had been dismissed because Derek denied everything and had wealthy, connected people vouching for him. Professor Marchetti listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made my heart nearly stop. She said that Tyler Morrison had approached the university voluntarily. He had contacted the Academic Integrity Office 3 months earlier, requesting to speak with someone about an old case. He had information he wanted to share. Tyler Morrison was dying. Cancer. The kind that does not leave much time for second chances. He had been carrying guilt for years about what he did in 2017. He had not written that code himself. He had received it from someone else, someone who had promised him that it was legitimate material from a study group, that using it was not technically cheating, that someone was Derek Holloway. Tyler had come forward to clear his conscience before it was too late. He had provided written testimony detailing exactly how Derek had approached him, how Derek had given him the code, how Derek had told him to submit it before a specific deadline. He had provided text messages, old emails, anything he could find that corroborated his story. Professor Marchetti said the university was reopening my case. With Tyler's testimony, combined with the photos I had taken years ago, there was now sufficient evidence to overturn the original finding. I would be exonerated. My record would be cleared, the failing grade would be removed, my scholarship would be retroactively reinstated, which meant I would be owed a significant financial settlement for the education I had been forced to pay for elsewhere. I sat in my apartment in Washington, D.C., holding the phone to my ear, trying to process what I was hearing. After 6 years of believing that justice was a myth, that the powerful always won, that what had happened to me would never be made right, I was being told that the truth was finally coming out. Professor Marchetti asked if I would be willing to provide a formal statement as part of the case review. She also asked if I would be willing to testify if Derek Holloway chose to contest the findings. I said yes, to both. The next few months were a blur of legal procedures and formal interviews. The university's investigation was thorough. They brought in experts to analyze the code, confirming that the stylistic patterns were consistent with my other work and inconsistent with Tyler's. They reviewed the original evidence I had provided years ago and found that my photographs of Derek's messages had never been properly investigated. Derek, of course, denied everything. His lawyers sent aggressive letters challenging the process, questioning Tyler's credibility, suggesting that a dying man might say anything to ease his conscience. They claimed the photographs I had taken were fabricated, just as Derek had claimed 6 years earlier. But this time, things were different. Tyler had provided his own documentation, messages from Derek that matched the ones I had photographed, details about their interactions that Derek could not explain away. The story was too consistent, the evidence too overwhelming, for Derek to dismiss it as a conspiracy against him. In December of 2023, the university formally reversed the finding against me. I received a letter stating that I had been wrongfully accused of academic fraud, that the original investigation had failed to properly evaluate exculpatory evidence, and that my academic record was being corrected. The letter also stated that Derek Holloway was now under investigation for his role in the original fraud. Specifically, he was accused of providing copyrighted academic work to another student with the intent to deceive, and of providing false testimony during the original investigation. Because Derek had graduated from Boston University and gone on to earn an MBA from Northwestern, both institutions were now reviewing his credentials. If the fraud finding was upheld, his degrees could be revoked. For a man who had built his entire career on his educational pedigree, who worked at a consulting firm that prided itself on hiring only graduates from elite programs, this was potentially devastating. But I did not feel triumphant. Not yet. Because I knew Derek. I knew how he operated. He would find a way to spin this, to minimize the damage, to emerge unscathed like he always did. I needed to make sure that would not happen. The financial settlement from Boston University came through in February of 2024. It was substantial, covering the additional education expenses I had incurred after losing my scholarship, plus interest and a modest amount for emotional damages. It was not enough to compensate for what I had lost, but it was something. More importantly, it gave me resources. Resources I could use to ensure that the truth about Derek Holloway reached the people who needed to hear it. I hired a private investigator, not to dig up dirt on Derek, but to find other people he might have wronged. I had a theory that someone like Derek, someone who would frame his roommate and steal his girlfriend without remorse, had probably hurt other people along the way. Narcissists do not suddenly develop that behavior in college. They practice it throughout their lives. The investigator found more than I expected. There was a former business partner from Derek's MBA program who claimed Derek had taken credit for a project that should have been collaborative. There was a junior colleague at his consulting firm who had been pushed out after refusing to cover for Derek's sloppy work. There was an ex-girlfriend from before Chloe who said Derek had spread rumors about her mental health to explain their breakup. None of these people had concrete evidence of serious wrongdoing, but they all had stories that painted a consistent picture of who Derek really was, a pattern of manipulation, credit stealing, and strategic cruelty. I reached out to each of them, carefully, respectfully, explaining who I was and what had happened to me. I was not asking them to do anything except tell the truth if anyone asked. Most of them agreed. Meanwhile, the university investigation of Derek was progressing. Because he had lied during the original investigation, he was facing potential charges of providing false testimony to an academic tribunal. Combined with the evidence that he had orchestrated the original fraud, his degrees were almost certainly going to be revoked. His consulting firm was notified. In high-end consulting, reputation is everything. The firms that charge millions of dollars for advice cannot afford to employ people with questionable ethics. An internal investigation was launched. Derek tried to get ahead of the situation. He released a statement through his lawyers claiming that he was the victim of a vendetta, that a former college roommate was making false accusations to damage his career. He painted himself as the innocent party, targeted for reasons he could not understand. But the evidence was too strong. Tyler Morrison's testimony, my photographs, the analysis of the code, the pattern of Derek's behavior over the years, it all pointed to the same conclusion. In April of 2024, Derek Holloway was formally fired from his consulting firm. The termination was listed as misconduct, which meant he would have difficulty finding similar employment elsewhere. His professional reputation, carefully cultivated over years, was in ruins. A week later, Boston University revoked his undergraduate degree. Northwestern, after conducting their own review, revoked his MBA. Both institutions released public statements explaining their decisions, citing Derek's role in academic fraud and his subsequent false testimony. The story made news, not front-page headlines, but enough coverage in professional circles that anyone Googling Derek's name would find it. The consulting world is smaller than people think. Everyone who mattered now knew what Derek had done. His engagement to Chloe fell apart within a month. I heard through mutual connections that she had left him when the professional consequences became clear. Chloe had always been strategic about her relationships. Derek without his career was not the same value proposition as Derek at the height of his success. Some might say she was getting what she deserved too, losing the future she had schemed to achieve. But I did not feel satisfaction at her misfortune. I felt nothing at all. Chloe was irrelevant to me now, a character from a story I no longer lived in. Derek, however, was different. In June of 2024, I received an email from an address I did not recognize. The subject line was just my name. The message was short. It said, "I know you did this. I know you orchestrated everything. You destroyed my life because of something that happened when we were kids. I hope you are proud of yourself." It was from Derek. I do not know how he got my personal email address, but it did not matter. I read the message once, then deleted it without responding. What would I have said? That he was wrong? That I had not orchestrated his downfall? Only ensured that the truth came to light? That the consequences he faced were the direct result of choices he made 7 years ago? He would not have heard any of it. Men like Derek never see themselves as the villain. In his mind, he was always the victim, targeted by jealous people who could not handle his success. A few weeks later, I received another message. This one came through LinkedIn from Derek's personal account. It was longer than the first, more desperate. He wrote that he was struggling to find work, that his professional network had abandoned him, that his family was disappointed in him, that he had made mistakes, yes, but did not deserve to have his entire life destroyed. He asked if there was anything he could do to make things right between us. He said he was willing to apologize, to make amends, to do whatever it took to get me to call off whatever campaign I was running against him. I read this message several times, trying to feel something. Triumph, maybe, or satisfaction, or even the hollow emptiness of revenge achieved. What I felt instead was pity. Not pity for Derek specifically, but pity for the person he could have been if he had made different choices. If he had not seen other people as tools to be used and discarded. If he had understood that the connections between human beings are sacred things, not strategic advantages to be exploited. I did not respond to that message either. A month passed, then 2. The initial wave of coverage about Derek's disgrace faded into the background noise of the internet. His name still appeared when you searched for him, but it was no longer the first thing people talked about. I assumed that would be the end of it, that Derek would slink away somewhere, rebuild some version of a life, and eventually become just another cautionary tale I would tell myself when I wondered if people ever really face consequences for their cruelty. I was wrong. In September of 2024, I received an email from Professor Marchetti. She wanted to give me a heads up about something. The academic integrity case against Derek had concluded, but during the investigation, additional information had come to light. Specifically, information about the scope of Derek's fraudulent behavior during his time at Boston University. It turned out that the code he had given Tyler Morrison was not an isolated incident. Derek had been running a small operation during college, providing academic work to other students in exchange for favors, connections, and occasionally money. He had exploited his position as a popular, well-connected student to access other people's work and redistribute it to those who would pay. Most of his clients had been fellow business students who needed help with quantitative coursework. Derek had provided them with code, problem sets, and analysis that he had stolen from students like me, students in technical disciplines who did not run in the same social circles. The investigation had uncovered at least 7 other instances where Derek had facilitated cheating. Because of the time that had passed, the university was limited in what disciplinary action it could take against him beyond the degree revocations already implemented. But the findings were being shared with professional licensing boards in several states. Derek had taken the CPA exam after his MBA. He was licensed to provide accounting and financial advice. If the licensing boards decided to act on the information from the university, He could lose that credential too. The email ended with Professor Marchetti thanking me for my cooperation throughout the process. She said that my case had prompted the university to reform its academic integrity procedures, including better protections for accused students and more rigorous investigation of evidence before reaching conclusions. I wrote back, thanking her for keeping me informed. Then I sat in my apartment, processing everything I had learned. Derek's downfall was more complete than I had imagined. Not just one scandal, but a pattern of behavior that stretched back years. He had built his success on a foundation of theft and deception, and that foundation had finally crumbled. But here is the thing about revenge, even the kind that arrives dressed as justice. It does not heal the wounds that created it. The satisfaction I felt at Derek's destruction was real, but it was not the satisfaction I thought it would be. It did not give me back the years I had lost. It did not restore my relationship with my mother, which had been strained ever since I left Boston University in disgrace. It did not erase the trauma of being betrayed by people I trusted, or the way that trauma had shaped every relationship I had formed since. What I gained was something different. Closure, maybe. The knowledge that the truth had finally come out, that the people who wronged me had faced real consequences, that the universe had, eventually, balanced its scales. And more than that, I gained freedom. For 6 years, I had carried the weight of that injustice with me everywhere. It had colored how I saw the world, how I interacted with other people, how I understood my own story. Now finally, I could let it go. Not forget it. Never forget it. But release the grip it had on me. Stop defining myself by what had been done to me and start defining myself by what I had overcome. In November of 2024, I got an invitation to a reunion event at University of Maryland, where I had finished my degree after leaving Boston University. I almost did not go. I was not great at social events, and the idea of making small talk with people I barely remembered felt exhausting. But something made me accept. Maybe it was the closure I had found. Maybe it was curiosity about who I had become since then. At the event, I ran into my former advisor, a professor who had taken a chance on me when I transferred in as a community college student with a complicated academic history. She remembered me immediately, asking what I had been up to, congratulating me on my career success. I told her about my work, my promotions, my plans for the future. I did not tell her about Derek or the revenge or the justice I had finally achieved. That story was mine, not something I needed to share with everyone. But as we talked, she mentioned something that surprised me. She said she had always known there was something more to my story. That students who transferred in with my circumstances, who worked as hard as I did, usually had something they were trying to prove. I admitted that she was right. I told her I had faced some setbacks early in my academic career, that I had spent years rebuilding from a situation that was not entirely my fault. She nodded like she understood. Then she said something that has stayed with me ever since. She said that the students she admired most were not the ones who never faced adversity. They were the ones who faced it, survived it, and used it to become someone stronger. She said I was one of those students, and she was proud to have played a small role in my journey. I thanked her, trying not to get emotional in the middle of a networking event, but her words meant more than she could know. They reminded me that my story was not defined by what Derek did to me. It was defined by what I did afterward. I left the event that night feeling something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not for revenge, or justice, or the downfall of my enemies, but hope for the future, for the life I was building, for the person I was becoming. The last update I received about Derek came in January of 2025. His CPA license had been revoked by the state board in Illinois. Between the degree revocations and the license revocation, he was essentially unemployable in any field that required professional credentials. His LinkedIn profile, once a showcase of accomplishments and endorsements, was blank except for his name and a generic headshot. Someone told me he had moved back in with his parents in Connecticut, at nearly 30 years old, with no career, no credentials, and a reputation destroyed by his own choices. He was starting over from zero. Part of me felt something that resembled sympathy. The distance between the golden boy I had met freshman year and the disgraced man living with his parents was vast and tragic. Derek had been given every advantage, every opportunity, every resource that could lead to success, and he had squandered it all because he could not resist the temptation to cheat his way to the top. But the sympathy was fleeting, because I remembered what he had done to me, how casually he had decided to destroy my life, how he had slept with my girlfriend and framed me for fraud and then gone on living like none of it mattered. Derek had made his choices. Now he was living with the consequences. That was not revenge. That was just cause and effect, finally catching up. I have thought a lot about what this experience taught me, about trust, about betrayal, about the nature of justice in a world that often seems designed to protect the powerful. I learned that the people closest to you have the greatest power to hurt you, and that some people will exercise that power without hesitation if it serves their interests. I learned that the systems we rely on for justice are imperfect, biased toward those with resources and connections, slow to correct their mistakes. I learned that survival is its own form of victory, that the simple act of continuing to build your life after someone tries to tear it down is a triumph they can never take away. And I learned that truth has a way of emerging, even when it is buried for years, even when powerful people try to suppress it. The truth about Derek came out not because I orchestrated some elaborate scheme, but because a dying man felt the weight of his conscience and decided to make things right. Tyler Morrison passed away in March of 2024. I never met him in person, but I think about him sometimes. He was a pawn in Derek's game, just like I was. But in the end, he found the courage to tell the truth. That mattered more than he probably knew. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is this. The people who betray you might seem to prosper for a while. They might get the careers, the relationships, the success that should have been yours. They might look like they have won while you are still picking up the pieces. But time reveals everything. Character reveals itself eventually. The lies that support a false life eventually crumble under their own weight. You do not have to spend your life plotting revenge. You do not have to become consumed by bitterness. You just have to survive, to keep building, to become the person you were meant to be despite what was done to you. And when the truth finally comes out, as it almost always does, you will be ready, not to gloat, or to twist the knife, or to take satisfaction in your enemy's downfall, but to receive the closure you deserve, and then to move on. That is what I have done. I have moved on. My life now is good. Not perfect, but good. I have a career I am proud of, friends I trust, a relationship with someone who knows my full story and loves me anyway. I have rebuilt the future that Derek tried to take from me, and I have built it stronger than it would have been before. Derek Holloway is a cautionary tale now, a name that comes up in discussions about academic integrity and the consequences of fraud. But he is not my enemy anymore. He is just a chapter in my past, a challenge I overcame, a test I passed. I won, not because I destroyed him, but because I survived what he did and became someone better. That is the revenge that matters. That is the victory that lasts. And that is the story I wanted to tell. Not a story of elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations, just a story of patience and truth and the slow, inevitable arc of justice. My college roommate slept with my girlfriend and framed me for academic fraud. Years later, his career collapsed because of one dying man's email and the photographs I took on a terrible night in 2017. But really, his career collapsed because of who he was. Because the lies he built his life on were never going to hold. Because some betrayals do not fade with time. They sharpen, waiting for the moment when everything comes crashing down. I was there to witness that moment. And then I walked away into the life I had built without him. That is my story. I hope you remember it the next time someone tells you that the powerful always win, that justice is a myth, that there is no point fighting for the truth. The truth matters. It always matters. It just takes time.